Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Eagan Heath. I'm the owner of Caravan Digital, and we help e-commerce companies drive more leads and sales with paid search, paid social, and email automation. Today, I have on a returning guest. I have Matt Putra from 8X. He's a fractional CFO, Chief Financial Officer for e-commerce businesses, and we are going to dig into another very helpful calculator today. Matt, thank you for returning.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
So last time we had you on, we really dug into what sort of ROAS targets, return on ad spend, does a e-commerce business or D2C company need to hit in order for things to be profitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how much can they spend? What kind of returns do they need to see? And today we are talking about cash flow. And I know this is a big challenge and a big topic in e-commerce. Maybe before we dive into your calculator, you can talk to us a little bit about why this is such a big deal in direct-to-consumer e-commerce companies.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, we all have heard cash is king, right? And if you have enough, you can do a lot of things. If you don't have enough, you're going to die. So, and managing the various components of cash flow just become really important because it's too ethereal as if you just say cash flow. And so what I like to do is break things down into smaller bites so that you can understand them, manage them, improve them.
Yeah, I'm going to say it in an even that was well put. I'm going to simplify for myself here too.
Yeah.
I've a service business like you. Many of our clients will say, "Pay us up front," or we'll bill for the month at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
month. I pay my team, the beginning of next month, and so
Mm-hmm.
I believe it is that called a positive cash flow cycle if people pay me on time.
That would be negative if they pay you. Before you have to pay your staff.
Okay, negative. Excuse me. So I'm already learning things.
Yeah.
I'm being corrected here. So this is great, and that kind of makes my cash situation easier,
Mm-hmm.
assuming clients pay us on time.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, by the time I need to pay for the cost, I've already got the money.
Correct.
And
Yes.
for an e-commerce business, basically the opposite is true. Of they're
Yes.
buying inventory, they've got storage, they've got all these costs that happen before they even sell the product. Is that right?
100%. Some e-commerce companies they have to put cash out 6 months before they can start selling a product, and so managing that whole process becomes incredibly important.
Yeah, I can really see how if people are, design focused, brand product
Mm-hmm.
focused, that's their forte. They
Mm-hmm.
may not like all this number stuff. I could see why they would bring someone like you in. You know, what kind of challenges do you see people running into, or have you come in when there's really a big fire that you had to put out? What does that look like?
Yeah, I've done that a few times. One recently was with the change in iOS, their CPAs have gone way up, and they couldn't, between CPA and staff and other fixed costs, they couldn't afford to bring in the amount of inventory they needed. So sales were struggling, and so then the job for me was to sort of help right size the various components, so fixed costs, salaries, marketing spend, and as we begin to right size those, as we begin to find money for inventory, the sales started to go up. We also looked at doing pre-sales. And so they had a product that people really loved and that sold out relatively frequently. So I said, well, why don't you use that to your advantage? And so pre-sales with them has been working really, really well. And we are, again, when you pre-sell, someone pays me $100 and then I go buy my product. Your cash conversion cycle becomes closer to negative. It's still not negative for them, and it never will be, but it's closer. And today we're watching their daily net profit from Triple Whale, and they're breaking even on most days. And they had a multi six-figure losses in the past 3 years.
Wow, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
that hurts. Wow, for any entrepreneur to hear, but what a great
Yeah.
turnaround. That's excellent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I appreciate this context, Matt. Is there anything else to say about this other than just there's a lot of outlay up front? We need to manage that cash so that,
Yep.
Obviously month to month we need to be profitable, but it's even technically possible you could be profitable, but have
Yeah.
negative cash flow or be
Yeah.
upside
We'll
down
look at
on
that.
cash, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so the two kind of really important things that I'll say is keep your fixed costs as low as you can, right? Because for every dollar fixed costs, you have to bring in $4 to $5 of revenue to cover it. So as long as you can, keep fixed costs low. And the second thing is just know that small changes over time will add up to big positive changes, and I'll show you on the screen in a minute probably, but just do small things incrementally, regularly, and make those improvements, and they will stack up in a really big way.
All right. Much needed optimism there. Should we pull up the calculator, Matt, and you can talk us through it?
Let's do it.
Love it.
Okay,
And some
let's
people are going to be on
see.
audio potentially. So if anybody wants to watch this, you can check it
I
out.
see.
What's Working in E-commerce on YouTube. But if you are listening, we'll try to describe the calculator Matt is pulling up and kind of the
I will.
calculations he's doing. And this is actually the sort of consulting you do with clients, right, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. This is one of the components that we put into place when we work with somebody. We have 100-point audit and all these things that we do, and this is just one of those pieces. But it's an important one, and it's something that people can use without me. Your bookkeepers can run this file, and you can use it effectively even without me. So yeah.
All right. And you said the listeners and viewers will be able to access this if they want to run through it themselves, right?
Yeah, I'll send it to you, and it's a public, Google sheet, and they just need to like make a copy and adapt it, right, for their own purposes.
That's wonderful. We really appreciate it, Matt. Talk
Of
us through
course.
this. What are we seeing on the screen?
Yeah, what we're seeing right here is a fictional e-commerce brand and their 2 prior fiscal years. And so what we're trying to do first of all is just what is the state of things as we see them today. Now, we have for this fictional brand, we have 2021 and 2022 fiscal years. 2021 lost money in terms of EBITDA. EBITDA is net income plus income taxes, depreciation, interest, and amortization. So we look at EBITDA just because it's a better operating number. And so this company lost money in 2021, and in 2022 they made around 290,000. They have about 4 million in sales, cost of goods sold of about 55 or so percent. And so this is kind of what we're trying to do is just assess where things are at. So one of the really important numbers on the screen is we can tell what their operating cash flow is from this set of numbers, and their operating cash flow is 400 grand for 2022. And so what we want to do is make that a higher number if we can. And so what you would do, someone that takes this sheet, is you'll just drop in your again, your bookkeeper can do this. There's nothing special with how you use it. And so your bookkeeper will just drop in these numbers and then present them to you as the brand owner, or you could do it yourself. So drop in these numbers, you'll see what your operating cash flow is. Now, as we scroll down, what I wanted to show people next is now it tells you what is your cash conversion cycle. In this case, for the fictional brand, their cash conversion cycle is 73 days. What that effectively means is you need to put out $1 in expenses or inventory, and it's 73 days later you get cash, basically. So that's a long time. It's in relation to this sort of retail industry apparel, it's slightly better. I feel like I set the sheet up in a way that looked really, really bad, but it's fine now anyway. This year for like 73 days. Now, what I don't want someone to do if their cash conversion cycle is better than industry average is just to sit back and say, okay, this isn't something that needs work. What I'd like people to do is to look at this as an opportunity to continue building a competitive advantage, because most companies are not using a sheet like this. Most companies are not actively managing their cash conversion cycle. Now, imagine what you could do competitively when you have, 10 more days of cash than your competitors, or 20 or whatever. Imagine how much less in financing you're going to need. Imagine how much stress, like you'll have less stress just because you have more cash. We all know what cash flow stress feels like. So even if your number is good, keep working, and I'm going to show you how you do that. So
Just to interject there,
yes,
Matt, you said
please.
kind of imagine what you could do with a shorter cash flow cycle. What could you do?
Hmm.
Is it you're reinvesting in advertising, you're selling more? What do
Yeah,
you see clients do there?
all the above. I mean, you build a cash reserve, you can reinvest it into advertising, you can reinvest it into team members, you can reinvest it into growth, you can you could even buy more products, you can do more product development. um, Again, if you go on LinkedIn, even just for 5 minutes, like most people are having a tough time in 2023. And if you can be the one that's not having a tough time while others are struggling to kind of do their ad budget plus inventory plus, you can, in a time period where people are struggling, you can continue growing if your cash flow cycle is better than others. And so that's really what I want to see here, is that you're creating a competitive advantage for your business in which you can keep the pedal down even in times of economic stress. Yeah,
So we want to shorten that cash flow cycle, right?
as much as you can. Absolutely. And there are tools you can layer on top of this, financing tools, where in some cases you can get negative, meaning people pay you before you pay your suppliers. And we'll talk a bit about that near the end, I think.
Great. Okay. Well, how do we get this number down?
Yeah. So let's go to the next page here. And now, what this page, the first thing it asks you it says, how much will you improve? And there's a few categories. There's prices, there's number of orders, there's cost of goods sold, overhead, accounts receivable, collections, inventory balances, and payables, right? So how much are you going to improve these things? So let's just look, right? So let's assume you increases prices by 1%. Most companies, most of the time, most customers won't even notice this. So this is something you can do right away. Can you increase the number of orders by 1%? That is a very achievable goal. We're talking about going, in this case, from 55,300 orders to 55,800. Can your marketing team drive 1%? Of course they can. Can you reduce your cost of goods sold by 1%? Again, I'm not asking you to reduce it by 20% or even 50%, just 1%. Can you call your supplier and say, look, we've working with you for a while. Can we have 1% less? They are likely to say yes. Overhead, could you reduce overhead? Could you reduce your spend on SaaS tools? Could you reduce your spend on meals and entertainment? Can you pick off those things that are easy to pick off and reduce your overhead by 2%? Yeah, I mean, again, it's a very accessible number. We also asked this fictional brand to collect their AR 2 days faster. 2 days, typically, you just remind people more often and they'll pay faster. That's the easiest way to do your AR, is just to remind people more often. Set up flows in your QuickBooks or flows in your Xero that it reminds people 5 days before the due date, 3 days after the due date, and then you phone them 10 days after the due date. And if you do those things, you're going to collect 2 days faster, no problem. Can you reduce your inventory holding period, your inventory balances, by 1 day? That's not very much. That's really just you buying, you could buy 5% less inventory or cut one low performing SKU, things like that. Very accessible. And can you pay your suppliers 5 days later? Most of the time, most suppliers won't even notice if you pay 5 days later than you currently, like, again, assuming you're paying net 30 right now, most people aren't going to bat an eye at net 35. You just say, oh, sorry, we just got lost in the approval chain, or, most people, you can even ask them, hey, can we just pay you 5 days later for a little while? No problem. And then they're going to get used to it and you can keep doing it. Now, what do we see in improvements? Now, what we see is your EBITDA, your earnings would have been $104,000 higher if you had made these improvements we just talked about. Your cash flow would have been $200,000 better. And we'll look at the detail here. So on the screen, you can see revenue, cost of goods sold, EBITDA, balances, and then your cash conversion cycle. So as we walk through this, again, 1% more orders, you're charging 72 cents more for a product in this particular case. So revenue is now up by about 80,000 from those very two small changes. Cost of goods sold down a little bit, but you can see EBITDA, those very small changes have an outsized effect on EBITDA. Furthermore, we're asking you to carry $10,000 less inventory, which is not that much. Cut one or two low performing SKUs, easy. We're asking you to collect AR a bit faster. So anyway, all these changes total up to an operating cash flow of $610,000, where it was $390 before that. So that's
Wow.
$200,000 difference. Now imagine having $200,000 extra cash, more cash than you had the prior year. And again, sometimes it's just that stress relief. Sometimes you don't do anything with it, but it's just there. and when you're ready to make a play with it, you can. But it's so much less stressful to run a business this way.
Yeah, I can imagine. It is. I don't know if I'm looking at that right. It looks like operating cash flow, in 2022, actual is going to be, just under 400,000. Now
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about 610,000, like
Yes. Yeah.
another 50% improvement, right?
Yeah, and like the important thing to notice is that these changes by themselves are so reasonable. They're not big, huge targets. They're just really small things you can do. But when you bucket them by category and you make small improvements, it adds up to a huge outcome. The other thing that we're haven't said yet is that you do this one or two times throughout this year, but you keep doing it year on year, quarter on quarter, and we can see that we reduced the cash conversion cycle from 73 days to 65 days. So you're collecting cash, quote unquote, 8 days earlier. You again keep making these improvements, keep making these requests to your suppliers, to your customers, whatever. You can probably get this down another 10 days, and then you're going to have another 400,000 extra cash. So this is something everybody should be doing. And all it takes is just someone to run this sheet for you, report it to you, and then you just need to come up with new ideas to talk to your suppliers or your customers. But again, I modeled this for somebody doing. We had a client doing about 7 million a year. We think we're going to create for them 300,000 more ending cash than they were planning on.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. You may have mentioned this, Matt, but kind of what's a benchmark? What's a normal cash conversion cycle? And then,
Yeah.
what are you seeing in terms of what your clients are able to get that number down to?
Well, so the front page had for apparel was probably about 75 days. I would say anybody with inventory, it's probably going to be between 70 to 100 days, I would say, is what I see most commonly. But as you can see, we can improve it. Here's another example from one of the businesses that I own. We had a supplier we spent 600,000 a year with, and I called them and I said, "Hey, if I pay you an extra 1%, can you give me 60-day terms instead of 30-day terms?" They replied back by email within 2 hours saying, "Done." Because when you have a very big vendor, there's not a lot of ways that they can make more money easily. And I just gave them a very easy win, and they accepted it right away. So there's so many things you can offer your customers a 1% early payment option to collect AR faster. Anyway, there's so many things you can do.
Yeah, wow, great ideas there. Very interesting. I was going to ask on accounts receivable AR.
Yeah.
What kind of AR are you seeing that e-commerce companies have?
Yeah, so lots don't. If you're pure play e-commerce, you're only going to have, call it 5 to 7 days in those clearings accounts with your payment providers. Not always much you can do there. You can petition Stripe, I've heard, to do daily payouts or whatever. But again, I would assume there's not a ton to do. If you have a component of wholesale, which a lot do, then there's things you can do about this. If you're on Fair Marketplace, for example, they have an option where you can take daily payouts instead of waiting the 30 days. So I would just be asking the question, has someone ever called Shopify and said, "Hey, could you do my payouts faster?" I don't know, but you could ask. There's no harm in asking that question. So the AR is one. Again, if you're pure play D2C, there might not be a lot to do on AR. But could you do pre-sales? That's a form of whatever AR sort of. But could you do some pre-sales? Could you do deposits? Could you do memberships? Could you do something like that just to get a little bit of money in the door, just a little bit faster? Like, again, small things, outsized effects. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, that might be a good place to leave it. Matt, it sounds like you're willing to share this very excellent
Of course.
calculator
Yeah.
you've built over many years of experience, and obviously you're saving people a lot of money and getting them cash sooner. So definitely encourage everyone to check that out. If it's okay with you, Matt, we'll link to this
Yes, of
document and
course.
people can check it out. Remind people, who you are and where people can find you, and who are good people to reach out to you.
Absolutely. So again, we're fractional CFOs for e-commerce. We have a really talented team. We're helping people make more money, preserve more cash, have less stress, right? Who's a good fit for us? I mean, typically we work with companies that are either funded or they're doing 2 million a year or more. If you want to grow your business, if you want to fix your business, we're the ones to talk to. If everything's going well, you don't need us, but we can do bookkeeping for you. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look at Matt Putra on LinkedIn. My email will be in this sheet. So you're welcome to email me if you have any questions as you work through the sheet. And again, if you follow me on LinkedIn, great place to start. I try to just add as much value as I can there. And you're welcome to ask questions and comments on my posts or DM me, whatever helps you.
All right, Matt Putra from ADEX, thank you for coming back on and sharing what's working in e-commerce.
Thanks for having me, Eagan.